Okay, before we go to interactions, let me bring in another set of variables, which is how we incorporate dichotomous variates into the equation. And actually, we can extend this to categorical variables. But let's just look at the simple ones. So, for example, and we call them indicator variables. Sometimes in the literature, you'll see them called dummy variables, but why inflict that on them? So let's call them indicator variables. So, for example, let's look at toxemia. So if the mother was toxemic at delivery, then we say 1. This variable will take on the value 1. If the mother was not, then this variable will take on the value 0. So, all right. Now, when we fit the head circumference on gestational age and this variable toxemia, we find, we call it tox, we find that there is the regression line. Now, this variable takes on the values 0, 1, as I said. So when this value is equal to 1, that means when the mother is toxemic, then this is minus 1.4, subtracted from 1.5, and we get 0.083. So here is the regression line for the babies born of toxemic mothers. And when, for the non-toxemics, then tox is equal to 0, the variable is equal to 0, we see from up here, and so there is the regression line. So the regression line is 1.5 plus 0.874. So we see that these two lines are parallel to each other. They've got the same slope. So the two lines have the same slope, they just have different intercepts. So there's the intercepts. So those are different. So if we fit here's the stator call, we see that everything I've just told you comes out from that. Now, the R-squared is not as good as when we did it, adjusted R-squared is not as good as when we did it for weight. It's now only a 0.645. So probably the weight carries more weight than, no pun intended, than the toxemia. But that's all right. What we get is we get two parallel curves like this. So here are the two fitted regression lines. Now, these two lines, as I said, are parallel. So the question is, does gestational age, see, you can argue that why did the pregnancy come to an end and the delivery? Was this something due to the mother? Was this something due to the fetus? What caused the delivery to happen? Well, if you think of toxemia, then that's certainly something that has to bear on the mother's condition, certainly. And the question is there possibly some sort of interaction between what happens with toxemia and gestational age? So does it mean something slightly different, gestational age for toxemic mothers than babies having been born of a toxemic mother than it does for babies born non-toxemic mothers? So one way to try and get some idea about that is to bring in this interaction. So, but first of all, we can say, all right, let's look at the t-test. And so here's the t-test for head circumference by toxemia. And we see that we have 79 observations who are non-toxemic and 21 who are toxemic. And we see that the t-test is not significant. So this, if we just do it this way, we see that there's no significant difference. All right? So already we're set up here. But what happens is toxemia happens later in the pregnancy. And later in the pregnancy, we saw gestational age impacts on head circumference. So all of this is very complex. How do all of these things work together? So what we can do is we can generate a variable called gestational age times toxemia. This is called an interaction term. And let's put that into the regression equation. And lo and behold, what happens? Well, all of a sudden, toxemia is not important. The gestational age toxemia product is not important. The only thing that's left important is gestational age. So we've brought in another variable that has knocked out toxemia as being of importance. Not only that, look at the R-squared. It's 0.64. It's you know what happens usually when you bring in another variable? You should be explaining things better. The more variables you bring in, the better the explanation that you should be providing. Okay, so maybe there's something fishy going on here. So here it is, and we look at the regression lines, and wow, they almost look parallel. They're gently non-parallel, but they still almost look parallel. Over the experimental region, it's very difficult to differentiate between these and the previous lines that we saw that were parallel.